We begin the current Daf Masechta Gitin Daf Nun Gimel. We begin the bottom of Nun Beis Mabeis, 5 lines up at the bottom of the Yama, where the Gemara continues Allah. The next Mishnah, continuing the theme of the previous Mishnayos, again going into the last parak of Tikkun Olam. These are all Mishnayos. You do Zichri, you have to remember what are these prakim talking about. Tikkun Olam. This is what it's talking about remedy the world. Ashis quotes from Bekazich and Acheskel, turn to Daf Achayim, which turn to today's Daf. Some discussing today's Daf are Hametame. If someone made another person's Truma Tame, or Hamadameya, he mixed Truma into a person's chulin, or Hamanasich, he made another person's wine into yain nesach. So essentially, the thing looks the same, but he's ruining it. So the Mishnah tells us that b'shoigig he's going to be potter. If he does it by mistake, he's going to be exempt. But b'mezid, if he does deliberately, he's going to be chayiv. And the Gemara is going to discuss that halacha. Additionally, some of the important terms and concepts of kimli b'drabmene. Kimli b'drabmene is halacha that we can't execute you on two things. So if you're going to get killed, you're not going to be liable for monetary payment. Machlekes regarding which takes a huge stage in this daf and the next daf of hezek and nikash mehezek. Unrecognizable damage, if that is halachically defined as damage, which obviously that's the case of our Mishnah we're going to discuss, making something tamei, it's not a recognizable damage, is that considered damage. Machlekes regarding kanzer shaygat mezid, also very prominent in these two dafim, is do we penalize something by mistake because of something that is deliberate? So would we would we say that shaygat would have the same halacha? Machlekes of Maisa Shabbos comes in. One of the cases is regarding if someone did a malacha on Shabbos, is it prohibited to have benefit? If it is, some big machlekes we have in Masechet Shabbos, but we're going to quote it regarding our halacha of is it permitted for you, for someone else, on Shabbos, on Motzei Shabbos. So begin the current daf Nun Beis Mabeis, 5 lines up from the bottom of the Amud, says the Mishnah, Hametame. If someone makes his friend's taharas tame, for example, let's say it was truma, or v'hamadameya, the Demua makes a mixture. He takes truma and he mixes it in his friend's chulin. Now it's creating a loss because that's now forbidden to non-kahanim because it has a mixture of truma inside of it, and you have to sell it to kahanim. Now when you sell it to kahanim, you get it cheaper. You don't get as much money because it's a much smaller pool of people that you could sell it to. Of a hamanasich, if someone pours the wine of his friend, the Gemara is going to explain exactly what is the case of manasich. So if he does any one of these things b'shoigig, by mistake, so the Gemara is going to explain the reason for this halacha. Potter is exempt from the monetary payment, but Meisiv it does deliberately chayiv, he's going to be chayiv. Now the Gemara explains the first case, the third case of Itmar. We have machlekes regarding how to qualify menasich. Rav Amar, it says menasich mamish. It means literally you mix with your hands inside of the wine for the purposes of idolatry. That's the whole reason why we all concerned with non-mevushal wine, with goyim, because that was the way they would do it. They would literally pour it. It's a mixing, a movement of the wine. So literally, the guy he pushed around the guy's wine for the purpose of avodah zara, making it into yayin nesach. Shmuel Amar, he says ma'achiv. No, it's actually what he did was he mixed the yayin nesach, which is wine from avodah zara, into this guy's kosher wine, and now it's forbidden to no, like we know all tarayvus, when you have a mixture of something treif and something kosher, he mixed non-kosher wine into the guy's kosher wine. So those are the two different interpretations of menasich. So the Gemara explains, why doesn't Shmuel say like Rav, that the literal translation usually would be, menasich means you took the guy's wine, you poured it for the purpose of idolatry. Well, zooks that it's a mixing of the wines. So Amalach, he would tell you, no, it's not true, it can't be. You know why? Because menasich, it can't be the halacha of the Mishnah that when we said that if you deliberately pour, you can be chai b'tashlumin, because this guy is doing avodah zara. You do avodah zara, you get skila, and that's the halacha of kam lei b'derabimine. You're going to get the greater punishment of the two. So you're not going to be liable for monetary payment if you do it deliberately. You do it deliberately, you're getting skila. So it can't be the case of menasach because that you chai b'tashlumin, you would be exempt because of that you're liable for the more severe penalty of death. The other man that would tell you, no, that's not true. You're making a mistake. Because the Amr Birmiyah said the following halacha. You could be chayiv for both. How's that possible? Because they're not happening at the same time. Mishas hagba, the moment that you lifted up that guy's wine with the intention of stealing it, hu dekana, it's at that moment that you are acquiring that guy's wine, and it's at that moment that you're chayiv b'tashlumin because you stole it. But the liability for your soul for getting executed, that's only until you actually do the nisach hayayin. It's not happening at the same time. Kamalid Raman is only when things happen at the same time. Since you're ready with chayiv and tashlumin beforehand, The later liability of death has not exempt you from previous obligations that you had, and therefore it would not be under the exemption of Kol Rab. And therefore, yes, it could be menasich mamish to the halacha of the Mishnah. Now the Gemara goes the other way. According to Rab, that says that the interpretation means to actually pour. Why doesn't he say like Shmuel's interpretation? It means mixing it together, because the other cases actually do seem to be similar to this idea. So Amalachi would tell you, no, to the contrary. That's why I don't say it like that. Ma'ariv, as we continue to talk about Gimel and Aleph, if I'm going to say it just means mixing together yayin nesach into someone's kosher wine, this is the same thing as one of the other three cases we discussed, where you're mixing together something permitted with something that makes it forbidden. And since I already know that the Rabbanan said that we're going to penalize you, so obviously I'm going to learn out the same thing regarding Menasech, and I don't need to say that as a specific case. But now that I'm saying Menasech means literally taking and pouring from Avodah Zarah, that I needed the Mishnah to tell me, because to the contrary, exactly like the Gemara thought, that maybe you say Kamad Ramane, and that's why Shmuel disagrees, and you would say there's going to be Potter, so that's a Rabbi to tell you, no, it's not Kamad Ramane, like Rabbi Yirmiyah's halacha, it's not happening at the same time, and therefore it can be Chayiv. But to say Shmuel's case of Ma'ariv, I have to tell you 100 different cases of mixing it together. It's all the same idea, and therefore that's why he didn't learn Manasach means Ma'arif. But Idach Shmuel would respond back to you, it's not true, and this again is a little of a cheshbon over here, but Mitame and Medameya, there that although the Mishnah already told me that when you do it deliberately you're going to be chayiv, but kanasuhu, it's a penalty, because it's, as we're going to discuss shortly, a hezek sheni nicker. It's not a recognizable hezek. It looks the same thing as it always did, and that's not called hezek. Now, when you're dealing with halachas of kanasa, so umi kanasa lo yafina, you cannot learn out from another knas, because it's not a din, it's a knas. When you make a knas, it's where you made the knas. Where you didn't make it, you didn't make it. And even if it's the same exact type of context, you cannot learn out from knas. So therefore, yes, I had to say menasich, which is ma'ar, which is mixing, even though it seems to be exactly the same thing like metameya, but it doesn't make a difference. When we make a penalty, it's only for these cases. We don't say it for other things that even though they're very similar, like yesterday in Shabbos Batam, so certain things you're not supposed to do on certain times. There's certain things that are similar. Yeah, you're not supposed to distract yourself from a tinus, but it's not what they said. So we say it doesn't make a difference. It can be a similar idea, but like the place can say, it's not what we made the gezeira on. So too is the halacha of kanas. You're not going to add on more than what was necessary, and therefore we have to tell you also the case of ma'arif. But then the Gemara says, okay, fine, that's Shmuel's answer. But L'manda Yol of Knas Miknasa, in other words, Rav, that obviously says you learn that one Knas from another Knas, because he said the reason why I'm telling you that the Manasich of the Mishnah means literally pouring it for Avodah Zarah and not saying a case of mixing Yain Nesach with kosher wine is because I don't need to tell you that, because you'll know it from Midameya, even though it is a Knas. So obviously, Rav would say that you would learn not Knas from Knas. So then the Gemara says, wait a second, then Kol Han, the older cases of the Mishnah, Lamali, why do I need to say 3 cases of the Mishnah? Say one of them and learn out the others from that one, because you told me you could learn out Knas and Knas, and they're all saying the same idea. Says the Gemara, no, Tzricha, and this like a little, let's say a little bit cheshbon, it goes to explains why you need to say all the cases, and there's going to be a flip way of explaining this. So the Gemara says like this: the Itana Mitame. Had I said the halacha of being mitame someone's produce, so now there's 2 ways of explaining the case of mitame, because truma, if it's truma, which would be your classic problematic being mitame of something, Havamina, I would have said like this: you know why over there we penalize you when you do it b'mezid? You're totally ruining it now, because you cannot eat truma tameya, because only one that could eat truma is kahanim. Kahanim are not allowed to eat something that's a truma that's tamei, so therefore it's not fit for eating anymore. So that's if, let's say, it's your mitam is truma, and right. So we'll see that exactly. But that's what Rashi says. It's not fit for any eating. So it's a big loss. You know what I'm saying? To tell me that the prime rib I bought, I could use it for heating my the stove is a big loss.
Where do we learn that one knas from another knas we don't learn it? Where is the principle learning from?
It doesn't seem like it is. It just seems like, no, it seems like that's actually the Gemara's machlekes. Shmuel is saying you cannot learn that one knas from another knas. Rav is evidently saying that you could. Yeah, it's over here that we're discussing it. Not necessarily a precedent elsewhere. And Rav is obviously saying that you could learn that one knas from another knas. So that's what the Gemara is asking now. According to him, why do I need to say all the cases of the Mishnah? Just say, I get the knas. He did it deliberately. You did it hazek shenika. Shmei hazek lamachab. Why are you saying all the cases? No, so the Gemara is explaining now. Had we said only the case of Mitame, that's case number one. That was the first one mentioned in the Mishnah. So I would have said, okay, let's say Mitame is Truma, that's a total washout. And even Mitame Chulin, let's say Mitame is Chulin, yeah, I could understand why we're going to penalize you because you violated Isser. What the Isser? It's forbidden to go ahead and make even unconsecrated produce tummy in Eretz Yisrael because, as Rashi tells us, there's Perushim. There was a big sect of people that they even ate their chulin in the state of Tara, and therefore you're not allowed to make even chulin tummy in Eretz Yisrael. So because you did an Isser, I can understand that we penalized you. When you make someone's truma, someone's chulin with truma, it's not a total loss. Still fit for kahanim. You could sell it, okay? You'll have to get a cheaper price, but you'll still be able to sell it. I would say maybe they don't penalize you. That's for case number two. Now, so if we say medameya, I would say mishum neshchiach. It's common that it could happen because people have truma, people have chulin. It could get mixed together, and the Rabbanan made a takanta in the situation that it shouldn't happen. That we're going to penalize you. But we're in the first case. If we only had the second case and not the first case, making something tummy is not common because it's usher. So I would say that we wouldn't penalize you over there. So I had to say the first case too. Had we said the case number one and number two of I would say because there's no other greater liability to exempt you from the monetary payment. A menasech, but again we're going in Rav. But menasech, which according to Rav means literally menasech, which you're doing avodah zarah, the kim rabne, you would have thought to say that over there you're getting skila. So maybe Emaloi, I would say you're not going to be liable for monetary payment. Kamash Malon, because you're Birmiya. Like Rabbi Yirmiyah explained that no, it's not Kim Rabbanei. And that's what we needed the halacha to tell you of Rabbi Yirmiyah in the Mishnah, that no, the moment you picked it up, you were a kaina, and therefore you were liable for the monetary payment when you picked it up. And you're only going to be chayiv for the misa only when you do the avodah zarah. So therefore, that's why you have to say all three cases of metame, medame, and menasech. Now, we're not done with this because the Gemara says, throw us for a loop, because lahad tani avud Rabbi, and this did the father above and taught the following brisa that says actually he says, these three halachas of our Mishnah, there was an order to it. First they said hamitame v'hamanasich, doesn't tell us why, but he says the first two gezeres they made were if you metame someone's produce and if you do menasich chazru laimer. Then they subsequently said, they reconvened, they said afamadameya, also for mixing someone's truma and chul. So if that's the case, so kol hani lamali, then why do you need all the other cases? Meaning, as Rashi explains, since one of the first two that you did, you made a gzeron was menasich. Well, all the more so midameya, because there's not even the element of kol midamene. So if I already know mitame, which is similar to midameya, and you even said menasich, which even if you would have thought there's a kol midamene, they were telling you still give me chayim. So what do I need to have? The halach medamei, because the first version we were saying was, we went in the order of the Mishnah. We went metamei, medamei, menasich. Menasich was the biggest chiddush of them all. We said, even over there you're going to be chayiv. But according to this version of Avud Rabbav, and that the first two gzeros were metamei and menasich, and then only subsequent medamei. Why do you have to, what stops to medamei that you wouldn't have known for the first two that you already had? So it says we need all three, and I'll explain you as like this. And we're going to go in the order of how they made it according to Avud Rabbav. The Ashmin Mitame, had we said the case of Mitame, then we said you're going to be chayiv mishum deli kim ramne. There's no kim ramne over there. Okay, you make someone else's thing tame, it's a hezek, but we penalized you. You're going to have to pay him. Of menasech, and this was from the first two. That was the second one. Menasech, you would have thought kim ramne, like we explained. You would have thought you'd be exempt because you mechayiv misa. Emaloi would say not. So we had to say that case too. V'ashmin menasech, had we said let's say only menasech, I would say mishum de kamafsel legam, because the guy, it's total loss because it's actually even asabahana. You made it into avodah zarah. But regarding the first one, and that's what you pointed out before. It's not a total washout when you make it tame, because although it's a total loss that he himself cannot eat it, but it's still fit. You could use it for heating up, or you could feed it to the animals. Even if you made it tame and it's truma, it's still fit for hasaka, as the Gemara tells Mesech Shabbos of Chafei, or for the behemoth b'kain, so it's not a total washout. Imaloi, then I would say maybe we didn't penalize you, the b'mez you'd be chayiv. Okay, so those are the first two. You need both of them, mitame and menasich. Now, this is what the order was. V'yashmin hanitarti, and if I told you only those two, mishum the hefsid meruba, and that's why we see that medameh was not from the original three, because metame is a huge loss, because again, it's not fit for eating, and menasech is a total washout because it's even asabana. But regarding when you mix someone's chulin with truma, the hefsid mu'id, it's only a small loss because it's fit for kahanim. Eimaloi, I would say that we don't penalize you. So tzricha, therefore we have to say, even medameya is also going to be, if you do b'mezid, then we're going to penalize you that you are going to be chayiv. So that's why we have to say all these three cases in the Mishnah. Now, continuing with the halacha of our Mishnah, regarding this hezek shein and nikr, regarding that when you have an unrecognizable damage. So we said in the Mishnah that again, if you do it deliberately, you're going to be chayiv. If you do it by mistake, you're going to be pater. So the Gemara gives the background and the machlokes in that regarding what's the understanding of this halacha. So Amar Chizkiah says like this: the truth is, dvar Torah from biblical law, echad shogeg ve'echad mezid chayiv. Really? Why are you saying only b'mezid? Even b'shogeg you should be chayiv. My time, why should you be chayiv? Because hezek shein and nikr, when you have unrecognizable damage, like the cases of our Mishnah, they don't change from what they were. They look exactly the same. You know, when the food falls on the floor and the guy is sitting next to you, say, here, have the schnitzel, right? And he doesn't know. You know because you saw it fall on the floor. You're not eating it. Or the fly went onto that piece of pizza, and you're not eating that. You say, here, Chaim, here, you could have that pizza. I'll take the other slice. It's a hezek shein and nikr. No one recognizes anything. Oh, shmei hezek. In halacha, it's considered as damage holds chizkiah. So if it's considered damage, because the ma'aseh, it's ruined, you just can't tell. So when it comes to damage, the Torah does not differentiate if it happens through the person himself, whether it's by mistake or whether it's deliberately, as the Gemara says in the Chayvul and Baba Kama Pehema Beis, patza tachas patza, to say that why you can be chayiv on shogeg kemezid. This is the Gemara discussed over there. Adam Amazik is chayiv bein shogeg bein mezid bein og bein yashin bein oynis bein whatever. He's chayiv in all different situations. So if that's the case, so matamam b'shogeg pater. So if you're saying, says Chizkiah, I'm saying that when you do it, hezek shein and nikr, which is the case of metame, it does not recognize. What is it? You damage it. Obviously, that by desire, it's also banah. So then, why, if you did it by mistake, are you pater? Adam amazik, a person that damages, is chayiv even if it's b'shogeg too. The reason is so that he should notify the victim that he made it tameh or that he mixed it together with truma. Because if you're going to hold him liable, not going to tell him. I don't want to pay out. So then what's going to happen is now the guy's going to be eating something forbidden. Either truma tameya, or because there's truma inside his chulin, or because it's avodah zarah, whatever it is. So to incentivize the guy to let him know he did it by mistake, so we don't want to penalize him in that situation. We said, okay, we're not going to make you pay. That's why. So it's rabbinic exemption on the case of b'shogeg. Says that's the case of nami. What do you mean? Even if he does deliberately, also. You want the guy who's the victim to know that he doesn't violate an issur by eating it. His thing's not kosher. So even if he does deliberately, why don't you say that he should be exempt then to also incentivize him to let him know? Says, no, it's not true. I don't need to incentivize him. This guy, why did he make it tummy? Why did he mix it with truma? If he did it deliberately. If he didn't do it to provoke him then, and let him know, why would he do it? So obviously I do it I do it like you think he's not going to let him know? Of course he's going to let him know. What's he doing it for? So in Shemayim, he thinks the guy's going to get like, what is it with the Fridim Cheshbon? He wants to know. Yeah. And this, I just made it into avodah zarah. Right? What are you going to do about that now? So of course he's going to let him know. So I don't need to exempt him from the monetary payment. So this is all according to Chizkiah, based on the principle of hezek shein and nikr, he holds is considered as hezek. But Rabbi Yochanan, he goes the opposite way. He says, Dvar Torah, regarding biblical law, echad shogeg echad mezid, whether you do it by mistake or deliberately, pater. My time, why would you be pater really in the halacha of our Mishnah from biblical halacha? Because hezek shein and nikr lo yishmei hezek. Because if it's not recognizable, halacha doesn't recognize things that are not recognizable. Like, for example, with bugs and all these types of things we say, if you can't see it and you need to have a microscope, we don't consider halacha. It has to be things that you could recognize. So if this is a hezek that's not recognizable, we don't consider it a hezek. So then the question comes the other way. So then why did they say that if you do it deliberately, give me chayiv? Why are you chayiv? If minat Torah, it's a hezek shein and nikr. Oh, it's is that you shouldn't have everyone going and making his friends taras tamei. But I'm exempt. Now, even though obviously b'dei shemayim you're doing a big problem, but the ma'aseh monetarily you'll be exempt. So you'll make the guy's things tamei and you won't be concerned, which obviously would be a big loss for that guy. So therefore, rabbinically, we instituted a penalty when you do b'mezid. If you did it, the guy was shaggy, okay, it was a mistake. But B'meizid, that's what we're going to hold these Michayev. So even though in Minat Torah you should be Pater, B'meizid Michayev says the opposite angle from Chizkiah. So now the Gemara is going to go through a few different rayas, asking on these opinions, starting over the question on Chizkiah from Tznan. The Mishnah said on the next Daf, on Daf Nandal Mabez. The Mishnah says the following case: HaKahanim shepiglu b'mikdash. A kahanim that made a carbon pigul. Pigul is that you have a machshava of that I want this carbon to be eaten beyond its time or beyond its place, and when he was slaughtering it or when he was spraying the blood, that kohen had in mind, okay, I want it to be eaten beyond the area where it's allowed to be eaten. So that makes that the carbon is not acceptable for the owner, the halacha of pigul. So the halacha says the Mishnah in the next daf, mezidim, if the kahanim did it deliberately, meaning they knew that it's going to invalidate the carbon like that, chayavin, they can be liable to pay the monetary value to the owner because they need to bring other karbanis. And as Rashi says, even if it was in a dava, which you don't have to bring another one, it's still very difficult in the guy's eyes that his carbon is not being brought because he wasn't able to bring the gift that he wanted to bring to Hashem. So therefore you have to compensate him for the value of the carbon. Now, B'tani Allah, we learned on that halacha the Mishnah that memnei tikuna olam. The reason why the kohen is going to be liable is because of a remedy for the world. Now the Gemara assumes at this point what that means to say is that your kohen being chayiv is because of tikkun olam, because we don't want the kohen to get used to doing such a thing. He's like, I don't like this guy. I'm going to make his carbon into pigul, right? So to avoid that, so herzach too kohen.
Doesn't say what happened. Nobody knows.
Right, but we said, but after we said if no one's going to know, no, we said amazing. We said the guy's going to definitely let him know. But why is he doing it? He's doing it because he wants the guy to. If the guy does, yeah, he's going to say, by the way, you know, as he's walking out, by the way, your carbon's pigul, right?
Why is the Gemara bringing this case as a riot for a nezik?
Oh, so that's what the Gemara to say right now. The Amarin, if you say hezik sheni nikashmei hezik, if you hold a chizkiah that an unrecognizable damage is considered as damage, which obviously that's what pigul is. It looks the same thing as it always did, but now there's obviously a complete washout. Hi, shaygin peturin memnei tikkun olam mibayalei. Why are you saying that he's going to be chayiv because of tikkun olam? That's not the case. It's the other way around. If he does it by mistake, because of tikkun olam, we exempt him because the chiv of mezid is deraisa. The tikkun olam is that it would be appropriate on why we would exempt you, so that you should let him know that you did it by mistake, so that he doesn't eat a carbon that's pigul. So that obviously seems like Rabbi Yechanan and not like Chizkiah. Says Gemara, no, this is really what the Mishnah means to say. Mezidin chayavin. When you do it deliberately, you mechayiv. The inference is hashayim peturin. If you do it by mistake, you can be pater. On that is what the teaching is saying. Mipnei tikuna oilam. Not on the mezid chayiv, on the shayim pater. Because being chayiv is minat Torah. Because hezik sheinik shmei hezik Chizkiah. It's only on the inferential shayim pater. That's what we're saying, because take it up, because we want you to let him know. Another question asked the Gemara on Chizkiah, Masar Rebbe Lazar, on the following brisa. If someone does work with the mechatas, meaning mechatas is the para aduma has this ash water, the water of the purifying water. So if someone does malacha with it, or ubaparas chatas, meaning the cow itself, the red heifer itself. So what happens is, it invalidates it when you do work with it, because the pasuk says, "Mamid b'yotes ashaloy oleha oil," which you can't do any work with. You can't put any yoke on the animal. Now that's regarding the animal. Regarding the meichat, that's the water. The pasuk says, "Lemeshmeres lemei nida." It should be for a safeguarding for spraying waters, which the Sifri says, what's that coming to teach us? Because you would have thought to say that only malacha invalidates in the cow itself. How do I know even with the water? That's a pasuk teaches lemeshmeres lemei nida. In other words, that it should be protected for this. That's a meshmeres, and not that it shouldn't be used for something else. Which, if you do some malacha, you use it for something else. So that would invalidate the meichatas and the paras chatas. Okay, let's say someone did that. So he's pater medini adam. He's exempt from the courts over here to pay. But v'chai b'din shemaim is liable for punishment from Shemayim for the wicked people that he intended to create a loss for the Jewish people. Okay, that's what the Brisa says. Says the Gemara, if you say, like Chizkiah says, that hezik shein and nikar shmei hezik, that when you do a damage that's unrecognizable, it's considered as damage. So b'din adam nam l'chayiv. Why are you going to be pater b'din adam? You should be chayiv. It's a damage. Says the Gemara, Good question. He asked the question and he answered the question. We have to answer both the case of the cow and the case of the water. How would be that you'd be exempt from dini adam if hezek shein nikish mehezek? So he says like this. He says regarding the case of the par of the cow, this guy brought in this the para aduma, the red heifer, into a place where the animals gather, into the barn. Almanas shatinik. It's a very interesting case because he wanted it to nurse from its mother, which that's okay. That's not a malacha. Obviously, the red heifer is not a nurse. But v'tadush. Also, once it's there, he wanted it to thresh the grain with the rest. Now, as Rashi explains, he doesn't have to pay for what he did. Why? Meaning for what he did with his hands. Because he could say, I had the animal go in for a good purpose to nurse. Now, why is the cow going to become puzzle? It's only because of his thoughts, that he thought that he wanted also to thresh. Right, if an animal goes and threshes, it's not considered as he's doing a malacha with it. It's just walking. But if you wanted to thresh, you're doing a malacha with it. But I could say, when I put the animal into the barn, I wanted it to nurse. If I said that, it wouldn't have been considered doing a malacha. But since he had in mind also that he wanted it to thresh, so as Rashi explains, that's a grama b'nizakin. Why is it a grama, which you're putter on? Because we're not going to make you liable for your machshava, because here the invalidation is only because of your thought. As Rashi says, the precedent is the Gemara Pesachim Nachlavam Mabeis, which we have, the pasuk says the term of doing work with it in a passive context, which teaches oived duma de avad, which is that even if it happened by itself, like similar to the halacha of being machsh or something for tumah, that if you make it wet, you made it wet, it would become susceptible to tumah. It becomes wet by itself, not. But if you like it that it got wet, so then it would be considered hochsh lekabel tumah. So the same thing over here. If you're pleased with the work that it's doing, that would invalidate it. But that's a machshava. That's a grama, an indirect cause of your thoughts. For your thoughts, we're not going to make you liable. So that's why you can be potter b'din the other, because b'din the other, for thoughts, we don't make you chayiv b'din the other. For what you did, an act of damage, we would make you chayiv. So therefore, says the Gemara, I'll tell you why. Even though hezek shein nika ishmei hezek, why is this Bryce saying give me potter b'din the adam? Because it's all a machshava. It's only his thought that I wanted also to thresh. Okay, that would not be chayiv you b'din the adam. Din shmam, yeah, because you're causing a loss because your thought is making a puzzle. And now regarding the mechatas, what are we going to say over there? Why there? I did a malacha there. Why are you going to be potter with the water itself? Which obviously water you can't say the case we just said regarding a cow. That case is shashakal ben mishkalis. We're talking about where you used it as for weighing, which they would hang on a scale, and they would know its weight, and then you put a piece of meat to weigh on the other scale, where you didn't do an action with your hands. It's just really with your machshava, because if you didn't intend to weigh anything, you're just putting down a cup of water on one side, and you're putting down a piece of meat on the other side, so you didn't do anything wrong. But since you're intending to weigh it, that is considered as being as a mishkal, as a weight, is a malacha with it. It's your machshava, so therefore it's not chay b'din the adam. So even though it's a real damage, and even though it says you're nikach mehezig, but again, you're not chay b'din the adam. Someone can't take you to court to say you had maybe if a guy could bend spoons, maybe I don't know why you have to know what they do in b'din the adam. Something wouldn't be chayiv because the guy's looking at bending the spoon, but in b'din the adam we only chayiv things that you did with your hands. Things you did with your machshava, we're not machayiv you for. But says the Gemara, wait, that last interpretation seems to be contradicted because Rabbi said mechatas, the purifying waters as the Gitin Daf bays, shashokol ben mishkalais that you use to weigh are kashera. How can you tell me that it's going to be puzzle, but we're just not going to be mechayiv you b'dinei adam because you did it with a machshava? Rabbi says if you use the mechatas for a weight, it's actually even kosher. That can't be the case like mechayiv b'dinei shemayim. You didn't do anything. Says the Gemara, like kasha is not difficult. The Gemara tries a few attempts. Over here, meaning regarding the case of the brisa that we explained, that it sounds like it's puzzle, is where you're weighing begufan. What does that mean you're weighing with it itself? So Rashi explains the way the butchers would do is that they would weigh meat in water itself, which means they would have a vessel that had these markers inside the vessel, the way many types of household appliances that have markers inside, and they would first put in the water, and then you put the meat in the water until the water rises to a certain marker inside, and they intend already that they know that with a certain weight, it's going to reach to that certain mark. So they know that's how much the meat's weight is. So that's already doing it with the actual water itself. So that will be Machayev you B'dinei Shemayim. But the case of Rav is B'kenegdon. Is actually the case we described before, when you put the water on one side of the scale, and then you put the meat on the other side of the scale, then Rav says that's actually going to be totally kosher. It's not even the case of where it would be puzzle, but it just would be B'dinei Shemayim because you did it with your machshava, that would be kosher. The case of puzzle would be when you actually did something with the water itself, you put the meat in the water. But says the Gemara, really? Begufan, when you put it in the water itself, but then Maisa Kavod Bahu. Then that means you're doing action. It's not just a machshava. You put the flesh inside the vasa. And if you're going in Chizkiah, which we're asking on, that if an unrecognizable damage, considered damage, but din adam nam el chayv, then you should be chayv even with din adam because you did something with the water itself. So rather says Gemara, okay, a different pshat. No, both cases are talking about connecting, like we had said before. We're talking about that it was a scale. One side was the meat, one side was the water of the mechatas. But still, so what's the B'loi Kasha? It's not difficult because the Brisa makes it sound like it's possible and Rabbi made it sound like it's kosher. Not difficult because the Brisa of Rabbi Lazar was the Asach Daite, where you removed your consciousness from watching it because you were using it for weighing. So that became possible because of your Hesach Hadas, because the Pasuk says L'meshmeres L'meinida, that it has to be constantly watched. But B'dini Adam not going to be chai because that's a grama ba'alma. It's an indirect cause because I didn't watch it. The case of Rava that says it's going to be kosher is all along I was watching it to make sure it's protected. So even though I put it on the other side, that would not be an invalidation of doing any malacha with it. So therefore it would be kosher. So again, that's the case that we said. But again, it's not difficult on Chezkiah, who says Hezek Shen Nikish Me Hezek, because if it's Hezek, why you putter? So you putter because you didn't do any action with it. Both the pacha and the mechatas were gramas, were indirect causes, and therefore you're going to be pater b'dinei adam, although you're going to be chayiv b'dinei shemayim. But the Gemara continues asking, Maser Rav Papa. Papa asks on Chizki again, who holds Hezek Shen Nikish Me Hezek, from the following brisa. Brisa says, Gazel matbeya. If you stole a coin, v'nifsal, and it became invalid, meaning the government said, that's it, this currency is not valid anymore. So you stole this money, and now it's all that money is gone, is not usable. Or let's say truma, you stole truma, and then it became tameh by itself. So again, it's also obviously a washout. Or chametz v'avalav pesach, you stole 10 trucks worth of Stella D'Or, like we heard just before about people going on vacation, like Stella D'Ors. A guy stole 10 trucks of Stella D'Ors, and then he forgot it was Purim time, and then it's already after Pesach. He's like, let me do Hashavas Aveda. It's already Pesach went by. Also a washout because Hashavas Aveda Pesach is possible. So they're all the same idea, these three cases. So Oimaloi says the Brisa like this. He could tell the guy he stole from, Hadei Shalcha Lefanecha. What's yours is now in front of you. Now, this is only stipulating that he pays back those 10 trucks of Stella D'Ors, because this qualifies for what the pasuk says V'yikra, v'heshav as like zelasha gazel. You have to return what the stolen that you stole, because ultimately it's in the same state it always was. This is the same Stella D'Ors. This is the same truma. This is the same coins. I stole the Brinks truck from you. It's the same truck. The money is worthless now because the currency is void. Still, that's v'heshav like zelasha gazel. It's what I stole. I'm giving back to you. Frek the Gemara, but if you say hezek she'ein nikesh me hezek, even though it's the exact same truck, but if you say if an unrecognizable damage is considered damage, hagazenhu. This guy is a robber. In other words, he stole from him from the moment he took the truck away from him. Now it's in his domain. When he's paying back to him, he's paying back something that was already damaged. It's damaged goods. It's not kamasha gazel. It's not the same thing you stole. It's like as if you took a hammer and you smashed all these Stella D'Or cookies. You smashed them all. Because even though hezek she'ein nikar, it's shmei hezek. So you should have to pay back a complete truck full of cookies because you damaged it. It's unrecognizable, but you damaged it. So the Gemara Tiyufte refutes Chizkiah, because obviously you see hezek she'ein nikar is lo shmei hezek, because if it was hezek, then you would be chayiv. And Taisa says, even though right now we're going to bring that it's a machlekes tanoim, the Gemara still says tiyufta because that is the halacha that hezek shein nikah loish me hezek, and therefore we're first refuting him, even though we're just going to say right now the limit ketanoi.
What does Rashi say?
She yishamli oisli atzmoi, meaning you could give back to person something that was now useless, but as long as it's the same one that you stole, meaning I can't bring him a different truck of chametz shabbos pesach and say, yeah, look, these are exactly the same style doors I stole from you, just they're different ones. Meaning I got a different, I took a heist from a different guy, just mixed up, whatever. I'll give you back this 10 truck. No, that you can't do, because that's useless. As long as you're giving back exactly what you stole, you could give it back even though it's useless. But if you held hezek, it's like you smashed it. How could you give back the same? It's not kasha guzzle. No, it is kasha guzzle because we hold hezek and nickel loish me hezek, and I didn't do anything to it. It's exactly the same.
The coin would be exactly the same coin, or just the same coin, but not the same.
No, you stole from a kohen his truma.
Coin.
Oh yeah, the coin, the same coins.
It has to be the same
Yeah.
coin as stole from
Yeah.
the coin.
Yeah. No, can't be that can't be because that's useless. That has no value. That has no doubt. No, yeah, because there's no value.
It's all the same.
Right, but I'm saying this has no monetary value. It's only because it's what I stole. It's kasher guzzle. They're qualified for the halacha of the pasuk. That's why you can return it.
When he has a truck, what's the status? What's his responsibility on that truck while it's in his possession? Is he a shiur?
Oh, so that's the halacha that we see in the Baba Kama regarding a gazlan. What type of halacha does he have? Kinyoni gizela, is it his? And kasher guzzle, right? But
Because once he gives it back to him and now it's useless, because he's
Right.
a shiur on this particular stuff, even if he's giving it back,
Right.
he didn't do a shiur properly, so therefore he'd be chayav on that.
right, as long as he didn't do a shino in it or whatever. But that's what I'm saying. It definitely qualifies for the pasuk. Veish v'gzela shagazal. Right, you have to understand what is the status of a gazlan as he has it in his possession. But definitely, what the Gemara is saying is that when you return it, if it's as is, then he'll be able to return it. But the Gemara says, okay, let me ketanoi. Here's where it gets a little bit more complex. So those who are feeling faint of heart, take a leave now because we're getting a little bit more. It's going to take us into the next Daf. Let me ketanoi. Says the Gemara. Let's say like the following machlekes we have in the brisa. Brisa is like this: hametame. If someone, this is the same cases of our Mishnah, but it gets more complicated. If someone makes someone else's things tummy, or the mayor mixes it with truma, or manasich, or he does nisach, which again we had a machlekes. I'm around what the case was, but it says the brisa like this: echad shogig ve'echad mezeh chayiv dermei, not like the halacha of the Mishnah. Now in Mishnah we said you're going to be chayiv b'mezeh, you're going to be shogig pater. The Meir says you're chayiv for whether you did it b'shogig or b'mezeh. That's opinion number one. Next opinion, Rabbi Yehuda, he says like our Mishnah, b'shogig pater, if you do by mistake you can be pater. B'mezeh chayiv, if you do it deliberately you can be chayiv. Says the Gemara, my love, isn't it that the principle of chizkin Rabbi Yochanan is a machlekes tanaim? Why? Because the Meir Sabi holds hezek shein and nikir shmei hezek. He holds like chizkia. Unrecognizable damage considered damage, and therefore, even if you did it b'shogig, you can be chayiv. Because like we said, the Baba Kama Chavav Bey says on Petzah Takas Batza, when the person damages something, you chayiv whether you did it b'shogig or b'mezid. So yeah, fine, of course you can be chayiv. Umar sabalosh shmei hezek. But Rabbi Yehuda, like the Tanna Mishnah held, that's not considered damage. Okay, by Mamezid, we're going to hold you chayiv because of a knas. And that makes sense, because when you do things deliberately, we're going to penalize, because ultimately it's a loss for the guy. Isn't this the machlekes tanoim? So Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, no, not necessarily. I can tell you the kulam that according to everyone, hezek shein and nikkel loish me hezek. That actually, as we said all along, as we refuted Chizkiah, that when you damage something that's not recognizable, it's not considered damage. So then, wow, what shot in Remeir that you chayiv for shogig even as mezid? Oh, because it's a Talmudic principle that comes up often, that do we penalize something, as you see in the Masechus Hashas, all the different Maramakaimers, it comes up many times, do we say we'll penalize when it's an error because of what the halachic liability is when you do it b'mezid? The Meir Sabi holds comes to shogig b'mezid. Yeah, even though mezid itself is a penalty, but to reinforce the liability of mezid, we're going to penalize you even when you do it by mistake. So people tell them, no, we're not going to penalize shogig mezid. Mezid itself is a penalty. We're not going to penalize shogig mezid. Okay, that's the machlekes. So again, we're able to hold and satisfy that every Tana is like we refuted Chizkiah. Everyone agrees like Rabbi Yochanan hezek shein nikkel loish me hezek. The problem is you run into another problem now. V'rami de Remeir ad Remeir, v'rami de Rabbi Yehuda. Again, it's going to help come also into the next daf. We have a contradiction of both Remeir and Rabbi Yehuda. We just said They both agree hezek shein nikol hezek. The machlek is regarding, do we penalize a shaygig or to mezid? When we're penalizing you by mezid, will we also include the shaygig? Problem is they both contradict each other. I mean themselves. It's not like learn the brisa. A different halachic context. Hamavash b'Shabbos. Someone that cooked on Shabbos, which actually could happen more often than the person would realize. If people don't know halachas of Shabbos, very easy to do bishul on Shabbos. Someone doesn't realize he's taking a certain hot water straight from the samovar. Is something that he doesn't realize that the coffee has not been cooked before. Whatever, he's cooking on Shabbos. So what happens? What's the halacha? So we have a machlekes, and it's more complex as we delved in Masechet Shabbos. But here we're just surface touching. B'shoigig, if he did it by mistake, didn't realize. It's like I said, you realize you just did bishul on Shabbos? Really? Yeah, you did bishul. You just cooked the coffee beans. Okay, yoichel, he himself could eat even on Shabbos if he did it by mistake. But b'mezid, if he did it deliberately, he didn't care. It's like, kach, yeah. Lo yoichel, he's not allowed to eat. That's the Reb Meir. Now, Rashi in Ksubis, Daf Lamadal tells us, which some Gemaras have on the side, that's for himself. He's never allowed to eat. But others that are Yisraelim could eat if it's Matzah Shabbos. Okay, but that's not the most pertinent thing. Most thing we want to bring out from this is that what do you see Reb Meir saying? Shoigig yes, mezid not. Which means to say, he's not penalizing the shoigig or the mezid. I mean, the whole halacha of not being able to utilize is a knas. That it's called Maisa Shabbos, we're not going to let you. So by mezid, it's going to be aser, shoigig mutter. So it's contradiction number one. Reb Meir, just before we said, holds we do knas shoigig or the mezid. By the case of Matama, Bedama, Benasach. Rabbi Yehuda, the Brisa continues. Yehuda says, B'shaygig, if you cooked by mistake, you put the schnitzel on the fire, you thought, okay, what's this? It's on top of a pot. I once heard that you could put on top of a pot. What's this? I'm not putting it directly on the fire, but it wasn't fully cooked. So if you're cooking it, I don't care where it was, you're cooking on Shabbos. Okay, I didn't realize. So says Yehuda, Yoichel, he himself could eat L'matzah Shabbos. You can't eat on Shabbos, even if you did it by mistake. After you waited what's called Kadesh Yasu, the amount of time it would take to cook that schnitzel, that's the amount of time you have to wait Matzah Shabbos to finally eat that schnitzel. But on Shabbos, no, because even though it's b'shoigig, he penalizes shoigat the mezid for himself. That contradicts Rabbi Yehuda. We just said before, Rabbi Yehuda holds in the case of our Mishnah, only by mezid you have, not by shoigig. So he's contradicting himself also. The mezid, we did it deliberately, again, this parenthetical, but we're bringing in the whole brisa, the lo yochel lamas. Then for himself, he can never eat. Not even on Matzah Shabbos, even wait a week or a year, he can never eat it. The most severe of the three opinions is Rabbi Yochanan Hassan L'Roimer. He says that b'shoigig, if you do it by mistake, yochel Matzah Shabbos la'acherim, if you did it by mistake, only others on Matzah Shabbos, b'v'loi loi, for him it's always going to be asr, even though it did b'shoigig. Deliberately, it cannot be eaten forever, not for him and not for others. Because as Rashi says, Rabbi Yochanan holds, Maisa Shabbos, when you did a forbidden activity on Shabbos, it's forbidden to be eaten. And he learns out from Sukkim, and Babakama Davayin Alpha, and Alpha, Ksubis Dav Alpha. Okay. But says the Gemara, Kasher B'meir, as we pointed out, because previously he had said that we don't penalize that we do penalize Shoigat the Mezid, and here he's not by Bishul on Shabbos. Before we said he does not penalize, as the case of Tamidam and Nasach, and here he is penalizing. So what's going on over here? Says the Gemara, it's not a contradiction. Because Kikon is, when does he penalize? Bidrabanan. The halacha of our Mishnah, of making someone else's things tamei or mixing it with truma, is Eser Drabanan. Why? Because just since we said everyone agrees that when it's a hezek and nick, it's not considered hezek, obviously it's no issa deraisa, because from the biblical perspective, you would even do a damage. Now, since it's rabbinic halacha, we know a Talmudic principle that's brought many times, divrei seifrim tzrichen chizek. You know, people say, it's derabunan, it's a minnig, or whatever. So you have to strengthen it. So therefore, we're going to penalize you even if you did it by mistake. But when you cook on Shabbos, it's issa deraisa. That's not so common. People that violate Shabbos. Shabbos was always Shabbos. Even people that are not so care about halacha. You have some people that, okay, Nebuch, Loilainu, the Mechal Shabbos. But most people, Shabbos, it's in our blood. It's not so common for people to violate. So the B'derais only comes. Comes to biblical. We don't have to penalize. You did it by mistake. Someone by mistake pushed on something and it cooked. Oh, I didn't realize. We don't have to penalize you because it's Deraisa. You're not going to come to do it. Amazing, we'll penalize you, but not B'drabanan. The question says, wait, it's not a full answer. Because of Amanasich, if we go like Rav, one of the cases we mentioned our Mishnah of pouring the wine for Avodah Zarah is Dairaisu. That's biblical. And yet for Kakan is one of the three cases that your mayor says we do penalize shaygig. I thought by the rice you don't kind of shaygot amazed. Says the Gemara, yeah, because because the severity of avodah zara, they want to distance you from that isser. Kanasle, then they did penalize and they did strengthen it, even though, but you're right, but the rice we don't usually do it. Avodah zara is very chamer, so therefore we penalized you shaygot amazed. That's the regarding Reb Meir. And says the Gemara, and regarding Rabbi Yehuda like kasha, it's also not difficult. Why not? Because ki laikan is, when does he not penalize? Say he's the inverse. He's like the exact opposite logic of Reb Meir. When does Yehuda not penalize is b'drabanan, which was the case of our Mishnah of metamad dameh manasach, which is only rabbinic violations. Which one? Oh, that's what we're going to say in a second. But the raisa kanas. But by a biblical, then we penalize because you did a very chametik iser. You did an iser deraisa. So we're going to penalize you to distance you, and we're going to say even by b'shaya we're going to penalize you when you cook on Shabbos. But something rabbinic, which is more light, okay, we penalize you with did b'mezeh and not by b'shagi. So it's like the inverse of Reb Meir's logic. But says Gemara, wait a second, but manasich deraisa. But like on this, it's one of the three cases that he's not penalizing. I thought you said by when you do severe, very chamar, but iser deraisa. So why wouldn't you penalize it with ishagi? Says Gemara, no, to the contrary. Since avodah is so severe, people stay away from it, and we don't have to penalize you b'shayk because avodah zara. That's your mamish like a kaifa be'ika. Your mamish like so. Therefore, b'shayk by mistake did avodah zara. You didn't realize. We don't have to penalize. Okay, that answered that part. But now we move on to another question. We resolve the internal contradiction of Reb Meir and Reb Yehuda by answering exactly inversely the opposite way. But to say that the Rabbanans, which is the case of Amish, is different than the Rice, the case of Bishul and Shabbos. Problem is, says the Gemara, next step. I'm going to ask you, you told me but that by the Rice, by biblical law, that Reb Meir does not penalize Shaygot Amazid. I'm going to bring you another case that he does penalize by the Rice, Shaygot Amazid. So that's a contradiction in the case of the Rice itself. You won't be able to tell me the answer. You said, oh, the Rabbanan is different than the Rice. And that by deraisa he doesn't penalize. I'm going to show you that deraisa he does penalize even shaygig amazed. Because the time learned the Bryce the following halacha. Hanoiteya b'Shabbos. Someone plants on Shabbos one lamates malachas of zireya. So if he did it b'shaygig, didn't realize he has a nice beautiful vegetable patch. He keeps on talking about. He's very proud of it, of the vegetables he's growing. And it didn't realize was the guy. He saw his neighbor do it. His neighbor had a very nice patch. And he says he does it by mistake. So the Yikayim, the Allah is he could keep it. But amazing if he's jealous of the neighbor's beautiful patch and he does it deliberately, he says, I have kinna from this guy, he talks about it, you have to rip it out. That's regarding planting on Shabbos. Now, ubishviyas, there's 2 times that you're not allowed to plant. You're not allowed to plant on Shabbos, and Shemitah is the whole year is like Shabbos. On Shemitah, and again, it's a little bit complex just to hot cup in the halacha and then to get what our point is. But Bein Mishayk and Bein Mezid Ya'akar. Divrei Meir. Meir holds that on the Shemitah year, whether you planted by mistake or on purpose, I don't care, you have to rip it out, as says Meir. Okay, but one thing we see is that over here we're saying that on Shabbos, which is a biblical halacha, that we're not penalizing you, but by Shemitah, we said whether by mistake or deliberately, you're going to have to rip it out. Wait a second. Didn't you tell me, Reb Meir, that when it's deraisa, that then we don't have to treat you so severe because you're going to stay away from it? Only Divrei Rabbanan need to have to be supported. Then why are you telling me by Shemitah, which is deraisa, that you have to rip it out when you did it by mistake? You told me by deraisa, you're not kind of shagat amazing. Now we'll get to the fact why Shabbos is different in a second. But for the Shemitah halacha, which is deraisa, you're penalizing. And you're Reb Meir. You told me Reb Meir holds by Mevashel Shabbos, shag you can be potter. You could eat it yourself. What's the difference? And then we have a difficulty with Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Yehuda says like this. Again, it's also just a hot cup first. Rabbi Yehuda, he says that b'shvi. What?
The unction is different. Punishments are different.
What do you mean the punishment?
The Isser Shabbos is curse, right? Isser Shemitah is what?
Well, Isser Shabbos is even
So you
skila.
can't learn one to the other.
Here, you want to say that it would make a difference? I mean, the Gemara doesn't seem to think that it would make a difference of the biblical halacha, which is severe. You want to start differentiating if there's differences in Chiv, Mises, Bezdin. I mean, they both get skila, no? I'm saying Avodah Zarah and Shabbos both get skila. So they're both the same. Karas is when you do it without Hasra, and they both get karas. But when you do it with a b'mezid, you're going to get kara, you're going to get skila. So l'chayr it should be the same thing. Right, so no, shaila is, would you say one is more severe, and then therefore we would say, like we said before, there'd be difference between Rabban and the Raisa. But I'm saying, if you're being machmer on Shabbos, it seems like that you should be machmer. I mean, if you're saying that Shabbos, which is skila, which is the most severe, and you're still saying that shogeg, you're not going to penalize him, so why would avodah zah, why would Shemitah be any different? That we're saying that you're gonna penalize him. That's regarding your mayor. Yudam, he says a different halacha. It says b'shvius, again, just after Al Kab, in the Shemitah year, if you did a b'shogeg, here he says like almost the opposite of Mayor. Again, he said regarding the Shemitah year, no. B'shogeg yikayim. If you do it by mistake, you could keep those vegetables you planted in the Shemitah. You didn't realize Shemitah, what Shemitah, and you planted, you could keep it. Now the problem here, it contradicts what he said regarding Bishla on Shabbos. Here, you're saying that you're not going to knas by dairaisa of Shemitah otamezid. By Shabbos, he said, if you cook by mistake, we are going to knas you otamezid. So he contradicts himself also. Now, b'mezid, if you do deliberately, then you have to rip it out. So he's saying the difference in Shemitah, whereas Rameir said on Shabbos. But Shabbos, on Shabbos, he says, he says, whether by mistake or whether deliberately, you have to rip it out if you plant it on Shabbos. So you see that, so Rashi points out, why the same question should apply on Rabbi Huda. So the Gemara says, yeah, the reason why we asked it on is the first Tana is Remeir. So the Gemara is asking on Remeir, but according to Maskana, we're going to answer both Remeir and Rabbi Huda from this halacha. But the question is that we see that there seems to be contradiction. Could we ask on Remeir? We said Remeir is kasha, but deraisa. What do you mean? There's a contradiction of Rabbi Huda also. So Rashi says, yeah, we picked the first one, but the question's on both of them. But the Gemara first says, wait a second, and this is really part of the answer already. Utameich, according to your reasoning, tikshalach higuf, you have an internal contradiction in the brisa itself. Mechti, let's see. Haderaisa. Shabbos and Shemitah are both biblical. Maishna Shabbos and Maishna Shvis, both opinions differentiate between Shabbos, the opposite. Remeir says one way, Rabbi says the other way, but they're both differentiating between the two halachas. One is saying, for one, both are going to be asr, and the other one is going to be mutter when you do it b'shagi. So what's the difference? So Ella rather, and this will answer the question. Hasam over the b'shmita kediktani time. It's like we learned the reasoning because Amr Meir says he gives his rationale. It says why do I say b'Shabbos when you do on b'Shabbos b'shagi gikayim b'meiz ya'akar? If you do by mistake, you could keep it. If you do deliberately, you have to rip it out. But on Shemitah I say b'shagi b'meiz ya'akar. Whether you do it by mistake or deliberately, you have to rip it out. I'll explain to you. There's a specific reasoning. So it's nothing to do regarding the halacha of shagigat mezid. So it doesn't contradict their previous opinions. It's different principles, and it's specific to these cases. Because Neshe Yisrael Mainin, the Jewish people, they count their years of planting l'shviyas regarding the Shemitah year. Because like Rashi explains, you have to count the years of planting. Why do you have to count when it was planted? For the halachas of our law, and that to Ravai, we have to know when it goes out. There's not us from the first 3 years anymore, and in the fourth year it's going to be deconsecrated. So someone is going to see when he counts backwards the years, he's going to know that it's planted in the Shemitah year, because you have to count back. Say, wait a second, when did we plant this? Is this mutter to be eaten? Wait a second. That means to say it was planted in the Shemitah year, and people are going to say, oh, you could plant in the Shemitah year. Oh, but as we Gitin Daf of Nadal and Aleph, but you don't count the plantings l'shabbos, because you don't count days for planting, you count years. So therefore, it's not going to be known after a long period of time when you're counting back to know, is this still Arlo or Ravai that was planted on Shabbos? So therefore, says Rameir, why was I more machmer on Shemitah, even b'shaygig? Very simply, because you can't leave it in the ground. If you can leave it in the ground, people are going to think, oh, Muslim mutter must be this when the Rebbe was still alive, and whatever, it's mutter, whatever, they're going to come up with whatever tznitzim. So you have to rip it out. But Shabbos, if it was b'shaygig, you don't have to rip it out because no one's going to find the Shabbos anyway. Or another interpretation says Rameir, Nechshadu Yisrael al Hashvias. The reason why I was more machmer on Shemitah is because people suspect regarding doing work on Shemitah year. Because Shemitah is like a regular weekday, no one chaps. Well, Nechshadu al Hashvias, not suspect regarding Shabbos, everyone's wearing their Shabbos, with spadik, with a bekashay. No one's planting on Shabbos, so if you did it by mistake, you could keep it, but Shemitah by mistake, we require you to rip it out. Says why did he have to bring another reasoning for why he was more machmer for Shemitah? What was wrong with the first reason? Says what he was saying was like this. If you're going to say that actually Shabbos, Nama, even Shabbos, Zimnin, at times, you actually do have to count. As there's a brisa that says that if you plant Erev Shemitah 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, that 30 days is counted as the first year of Arla. Because 30 days in a year is considered a year. And then you would be allowed to keep it actually in the Shemitah year, because it's like it was planted from the previous year. But if it was planted less than 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, it's not counted as a year. And then you wouldn't be able to keep it in the Shemitah year because like it planted in the Shemitah year. So at times, it's going to come out the Mikla Yom Lamed b'Shabbos. What's going to happen is that this Shabbos that was planted is going to be exactly 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. Now the problem is the inatahu yama. If you plant it on that day, who the solkale shata, that will make it into a year. V'loi, but if you don't count that day of Shabbos, l'solkale shata, you're not going to have a year. So if at a later point in time, people are eating from this produce at the end of 2 years, they can say, wait a second, why are these produce permitted? It was only 2 years. It's still arla. He's going to say, no, because Chab, I planted this 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. That's considered as a year. So the guy's going to do cheshbon. You have those people that they know the calendar, this and that, and he's going to go back and he says, wait a second. That year that you're saying you planted 30 days before Rosh Hashanah was a Shabbos. You said you planted 30 days before? That means you planted on Shabbos. So people are going to come to be lax to think, that you're allowed to do it. And therefore they penalize them even on Shabbos. So you would think that we should be machmer on Shabbos just like Shemitah, because at times the cheshbon will come out to see when it was planted even on Shabbos. Therefore, I have to tell you another reason, says Rabbi, why more machmer on Shemitah than Shabbos, because Nefshadu Yisrael al-Shvi is the Jewish people that suspect regarding Shemitah. And we're concerned that maybe when it's going to be remembered, people are going to come to be lax and to permit planting on the Shemitah year. But they not suspect regarding the Shabbos. And even if we'll remember, we'll know that, wait a second, you planted on Shabbos, it's not going to come to make other people plant on Shabbos. That was answering regarding Remeir. The Yehuda like Kasha, it's also not a difficulty in the Yehuda. Why not? Because Ba'asir the Yehuda, in his place, Chamir le Shvuas. Shvius, the Shemitah was very severe. So again, we could be more lenient regarding Shemitah. According to him, B'Shoigig Shemitah, we let you keep it. Shabbos not, because if we're going to be lax with Shabbos, people might come to do it even deliberately. Because someone said to his friend, Dayir bar Dayarta. It means actually Ger ben Gieris. He was making fun of him. He said, you're a convert, the son of a convert. Amalei said to him a disrespect back. He says, I don't eat the fruits of Shemitah like you. So, we see that people acted like this even back in Talmudic times. But one thing is, therefore, he didn't penalize on Shabbos. He penalized on Shemitah, meaning on Shemitah he didn't make you penalize because people were very machmir with it. Whereas on Shabbos, maybe not. So therefore, that's where, according to Rabbi Yehuda, they penalized over there. But again, it's not a difficulty on their opinions regarding contract mezuzah. It has nothing to do with that. It's just regarding the severity factor of Shemitah versus Shabbos. Thank you to Anytime for hosting us.